Thank you all for coming. It's wonderful to be having this event. Thank you so much, Manny, for coming to school. Bain, of course, is one of the largest employers of our students. So, this is a relationship that we hold near and dear to our hearts. And it's wonderful to be having this discussion. I want to cover a few topics, and then we're going to have time for Q&A from the audience. But I want to talk a little bit about your journey. I want to talk about leadership. I want to talk about technology, AI, and the future, and what you see in consulting. But before we start, I wanted to give you the opportunity to sort of thread us through the journey that have brought you now to leading one of the largest consulting firms on the planet. Tell us a little bit about your path.
Oh, my personal journey. Well, yeah. Thank you, Dean Maglaras. And thank you all for coming and spending some time on Thursday night. Whether you're coming to Bain or not, you're graduating, or some of you are maybe not graduating yet from such a great institution, and you can make such a difference in the world. So it's always a privilege for me to come to a place like this. Thank you. So, my journey, in essence, maybe all of us have individual journeys that got us to this place. In my case, grew up in Manila, came to the United States as a sophomore college student, ended up staying. I actually just visited my dad for a summer in New York, and he told me, don't go back. I won't go into Philippine politics at the time, just stayed. And I didn't understand. I got an engineering degree, worked for a company called DuPont, went to business school, to some other business school in another city, learned about this industry I'd never heard of called management consulting, and like some of you, applied to a bunch of them, got a few offers for 10 weeks of my life. And I spent 10 weeks in San Francisco, actually working for the smallest firm that gave me an offer. Bain Company had 5 offices in the world, and enjoyed my summer, came back, and I've been there 35 years. So, time went by. And so the career journey, to some degree, being part of a firm that went through ups and downs. We sort of were 51 years old, but we really were refounded in 1991. I wasn't even a partner yet. You join firms like this, professional service firms, law firms, banks. You decide, do I like this job? Am I good at this job? And at some point, it's not about the job. It's the business. So there's a point in time when you appreciate not just the act of what you're doing, which is providing, in our case, guidance, consulting, management perspectives to companies, for-profit, non-profit, and investors. You then realize, I kind of like the business of consulting. And at that point, you think about your path in multiple ways, what I'm doing, but is this an organization that I want to help build, grow, and lead? And at some point in that journey, I pivoted from spending all my time serving our clients, what we call our customers, to actually also helping lead the firm in different ways. And then about 6.5 years ago, the firm asked me to play this role, the worldwide managing partner, chairman, and CEO. And then suddenly, well, you might have done different parts of the job, just like you go from being a very good professor to being a great dean. And my partners maybe have some aspects that are similar to professors. We can have that conversation too. So I've spent the last 6 years leading and running the firm now, and I've enjoyed it very much. It's been a privilege. And along the way, I got married, raised 4 kids. And I've been based in the Bay Area, although that little 5-office company I joined grew a bit along the way to where we are now. And it's been a privilege to have my life and career play out that way. It's not what I expected when I signed up for 10 weeks of my life. I thought it'd be much nicer to be in San Francisco than in Boston.
I totally agree. It's funny that you mentioned the business of consulting. As a professor, you never learn about the business of education. Universities until you actually have to do it. I've come to learn it right now, but you're allowed to live a much more blissful life for quite some time, as my good friend Bruce nodding in the background. I want to sort of latch on a little bit on the word engineering that you said, and then we're going to pivot to some other things. Um, so engineering training helps with, what people call system thinking, or sort of trying to sort of see end-to-end how things work, how, interacting parts come together, how different things affect. In what sense has this been valuable to your own journey? I know idiosyncratically how valuable it has been to my own journey, despite the fact that I rarely do what you do, but nevertheless, that the type of thinking has been useful. So how about your own experience?
I think it really has, and obviously we're hiring more engineers than ever. We're hiring data scientists, but we always hire from many different backgrounds. So I don't mean to imply that this path is going to make a difference in your career at Bain, but for me, I was a chemical engineer. My first job was with the DuPont company at the time. They were a leader in plastics. They're really now part of Dow. And I spent my first year as an engineer in a lab developing high-performance plastics. But the program DuPont had at the time was very holistic. You literally, you spend 1 year in the lab, and then you spend 1 year in the field getting in my case, I went to Detroit and saw many of the plastics we developed getting designed, built into automobiles. And then you spend 1 year at corporate in product management. So one thing I appreciated, back to maybe systems thinking or it's engineering almost at a higher level, I started really appreciating the interaction of all those different functions. That, marketing, corporate development, sales, design, all in service of, at the time, the DuPont company, and Bruce asked about full potential, to make DuPont a more valuable enterprise. It was a trigger. Back then, by the way, you could get into business school after undergrad. So I had actually already applied and got into MIT Sloan. So even as an engineer, I was already hypothesizing I would like to do the intersection of technology and business. I deferred my admission by 2 years. I wanted to finish the DuPont program. I asked for another deferral. They finally told me, either come next year, you're going to have to reapply. So I went off to business school. And then what did I learn in business school? All the different parts of a company, the interactions, strategy, operations, organization, they all interconnect to get to what you're trying to achieve, which back then might be as simple as increase the shareholder value of my public company. Today, it's a much broader definition. But I found that I enjoyed the overall integrated choreography of the different parts of a business. And that's why I was intrigued when I learned about this industry that I didn't know existed. As best I could tell, at least at my level, DuPont didn't really use management consultants. And I went into a room not that too dissimilar from this, with a presentation by a firm that doesn't start with a B or a B, but another letter, and said, that seems like a pretty cool way to apply the kinds of things I did at DuPont. I was doing at MIT, and I said, let me try it if I can get a job offer for 10 weeks of my life. And guess what? I'm boring. 35 years later, I'm still in the same office of the company I did my summer internship with. So, I think the engineering thinking did matter in terms of the construct for how you think about problems and how you think about influencing a complicated organism that is a typical organization.
So you train as an engineer, then you work in DuPont, you go to Sloan is small mistake, but it's okay. And then you joined Bain, and presumably you work throughout the world. You know, you're advising clients. You're trying to sort of you're also mentoring people, right, along the way. And then about 6-7 years ago, you're given the opportunity to actually lead this incredible organization that has actually been more or less your entire career vector. What are the sort of key insights that you've gleaned in sort of leading the organization in that last 6-7 year period? Because that's a big transition from the previous role.
It is, and even though on the surface, like many large organizations, I sort of, worked my way from the bottom, climbed the career ladder. That actually didn't happen here, and that's not generally even how perhaps, I was a non-traditional selection for the managing partner job. Not because I was Filipino and the first one who wasn't a straight white American male, but because I didn't come from the traditional management ranks inside the company. And inside professional service organizations, actually most organizations, there's paths where you're actually doing the core work of the company. You're designing product. Mark Parker, as the CEO of Nike, was a footwear designer. You're consulting, which was my core capability. So I wasn't this one who led the San Francisco office or led the Americas business. When we went through our succession process, which is an entire another different story we can talk about today, because some other companies have gone through their succession process quite in public recently. They asked me, as someone who had spent his entire Bain career on the front lines of client service, to pivot. And the way I thought about it, Costis, it was that I'm going to do what I've been trying to do with my clients for the last 25 years. I'm going to try to help this organization achieve its full potential. Back to that. And what does that mean? So just like my playbook for what I would do with clients, by the way, with one difference, I wasn't the consultant. I wasn't the counselor. I get to be the CEO. And by the way, partnership CEOs, just like university CEOs, are not a command and control motion. You have to build the organization, but you are the one responsible for the integrative strategic direction of the company.
I'm painfully aware of that.
Yes. And so, you're, by the way, the hardest jobs in this country today is, I know John Levin at another business school across the countries.
Yes.
Brave enough to take on the presidency of the whole university.
Yes, I know.
So this perspective, which was different, it was two things. One, I'm going from a consultant to a line executive, and I'm being the line executive, but I could see this is what I would do, what I guide my clients to do, and that's where the pieces started putting together. Anchor it in a vision, sort of full potential transformation 101. What is the vision you're going to try to have this company be? Why is Columbia Business School going to be, or is the best business school in the world? What makes it different? What is it about it? Put the set of principles that especially for people-based organizations like ours, that would allow you to achieve that vision. And then actually build a strategy to achieve it. And all the classic elements of strategy. What customers do you attack? How do you fund it? What organizational model? What technology do you need? Do you do organic or inorganic? We had never done a deal before. I've done 22 transactions in the last 6.5 years. And so I said, to some degree, we were just like one of our clients. And it's a people business, it's a services business. And like any client, any company has their own idiosyncrasies and their own foibles. Change management is sometimes a little harder in organizations like us, especially one that doesn't have a burning platform of any kind. And so that's why, but turns out because I knew the organization pretty well, and I'd had reasonable experience doing it for other organizations, it kind of worked out okay. And I think I've made a difference in what's happened with my firm the last 6.5 years, and I've been privileged to do that. And I, despite all the challenges in this complicated world that we've all had to navigate through, I've enjoyed doing the role.
Yeah.
And I got 2 months and 15 days left.
Good. I think another thing that you probably used and capitalized is relationship of trust with the people that were working around you. And I'm saying that because that has been the currency that has been the most useful to me in actually getting people to work together. I want to pivot to two last things before we open it up. One is you still see clients, you still travel around the world, you talk to people. What are the main things that you hear from business leaders today? Is it geopolitics? Is it technology, AI, climate? What are the things that are top of mind, and how do these things translate into priorities at Bain Company?
Well, you've mentioned those are probably three of the big four. It varies a little bit in my global travels, and you're right. This week I'm here, and I've been 2 days in Dallas, a day in Austin, 2 days in New York. I'll probably meet during the course of the week with about 10 CEOs of our clients. Even though I don't do consulting work the way I used to, it's actually valuable in business to have institutional top-to-top relationships, especially for your most important clients. But you've raised them. If I would say, what are the big deals going on in the world that influence company strategies, choices, maybe even your choices? Generative AI is the latest in a continuing wave of technology deployment that I've lived through my whole Bain career. And it's a big wave. The world, whether you call it deglobalization, the reorientation of the world. I grew up in my first 30 years at Bain in a world that was built on seamless movement of goods, services, talent. A kid from the Philippines could go lead Bain. Someone from Greece could lead Colombia. You could hire any talent you want. Visas were not a problem. You could move them around. The last few years, I had to painfully go through, closing a Russia office. U.S. and China are having their frictions. Not that many months ago, we thought we're in the path to peace, and that's reorienting not just supply chains, business models, where you build, where you invest. So that's number two. Number three, we have to build a more sustainable world. And so a multi-year, arguably multi-decade theme, in particular around decarbonization, sustainability, depending where you are in the world, that's still often in the top. Sadly, in some places, it's not. So you mentioned those three. And then the only fourth, I would say, that's just meaningfully different the last couple of years compared to the last 15 or 20, is we're in a world where capital actually costs something. And there was a long period of such an abundance of capital. I mean, not that long ago in Japan, you still paid money to put your money in the bank, right? And so a world where you have to be more disciplined, all of that is playing out on companies' choices, business models, valuations, and to some degree, that's what that's what we do for a living, right? It's all of those forces that make it so that companies have to continuously rethink. Back to my, what's our reason for being? What should our strategies be? What technology should I deploy? Which country should I go into or not? So those are the big things that you mentioned: technology, deglobalization, sustainability, all in what I would consider, after 30 years, a reasonable cost of capital environment. But it went way up for a couple of years, and now that it's stable, we can debate how stable it is. I think it's actually will build more discipline.
Good. I want to ask you about Gen AI, but I'm going to share a story. And the story is about a year and a half ago, I was preparing for a small conversation with members of my board about AI. And it was going to be in January. I would be coming back from like a long travel. So during Christmas, I thought maybe I should collect some information to share with them. So I told my daughter, who at that point in time was 16, and she's a good programmer. I said, listen, Cleo, you're doing nothing. Just write some code for me in Python. Go and download the transcripts of the earnings calls of every company in the S&P 500 for the year 2022. Look for the term AI or artificial intelligence or machine learning and tell me what fraction of them we're talking about. I don't want to do it, Dad. It's my break. What's an earnings call? What's the S&P 500? Whatever. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Don't do it. Come here. Comes next to me. I open my laptop. I go to my ChatGPT account. It has just, that was like December. It was released.
September 3.5 came onto the world and changed everything. Yeah.
So I write exactly that thing. Write some Python code, press return. 20 seconds later, 4 pages of code, 4 typos. If you know any reasonable programming, you don't need to know that much. You can spot the typos immediately. The code was running. Okay. The fact that I had to write some Python code is irrelevant because we talk to our Alexa all day long. We talk to Siri. You talk to your car, right? So presumably I didn't have to type it. So I could have, we're not that far, and now I'm thinking of consulting, where I can talk to my TV and I can say, go and find some data on X, Y, and Z, do this analysis, and present me with some results on a slide that has this and that information. I know of 3 companies right now that are doing exactly that. They're trying to do that. It's not ready. But in a lab, 2, 3, 4 years from now, we'll be able to do that. This is incredible, right? What is your outlook? What is it that you're doing? What do you see in your clients in general? And then after that question, we'll take it to the audience. Okay.
Well, why doesn't it surprise me that the 16-year-old daughter of Dean Costis Maglaras is, a heavy-duty Python coder? I'm dating myself. I
learned Pascal, okay, when I was young.
I put myself, my main job in college to help fund my education was Fortran and COBOL programming. That's how old I am. So what are we seeing on? So at one part, I do think it's a continuation of a wave of technologies that have been changing business models for a long time, right? And so we learned pretty early that you have to embrace that it's not just being good consultants, being good business people. I presume there's a core technology foundation for many industries, technologies, operations. And I lived through my first technology when I joined my firm. It's called an HP 12C calculator. You can look it up in a museum. But we lived through the PC era, the e-commerce era, on-prem to cloud, fixed to mobile. The early stages of AI, before, we were playing with ChatGPT specifically since probably 21, and we were in 22. I still remember in our worldwide partner meeting, we demoed this internal app that somehow they did. Ask Manny was the name of the app, and you'd throw out all the questions, could it answer real time, and so when about the same. So February was for us the start of this phase of AI. And we said, what's our client work with? We announced a partnership with OpenAI on Feb 21 last year. And that was, for us, the start of a really meaningful, I'll call it a boom of demand and interest in how does this, and that was one specific app and company. Now, obviously, there's many different players at each layer of this new evolving technology stack that is changing business models. So what are we seeing? We're doing this work in pretty much every industry. Most companies at the C or board level have decided we have to invest to understand how this will influence our business. Many of them have taken them out to very specific applications and use cases, and so I'll share some, some specifics. Probably 20-25% of them are looking at it enterprise-wide. The rest are looking at use case by use case. The highest potential are maybe the obvious ones, things like customer care, knowledge assistance. We are, to some degree, you can think of Bain as a knowledge assistant, coding, marketing, across different industries, but frontline ones like financial services, health. You can correlate where the major use cases are to how big the part of an industry's operations or cost structure it is. So and then all of these use cases will generally require choices in your, maybe at the simplest, the technologies you're going to deploy. But then back to the rest of the full potential agenda, it also creates choices on operating models. It creates choices on whether you're going to build entirely new businesses or ride your old one. It requires choices on your talent. Our fastest growing sources of talent are not pure generalist MBAs. We still hire that more than anybody else. And so all of those are happening. At the same time, it's early. So you also said where this will go. Frankly, maybe 10 or 15% of our clients, which are now in the hundreds, are actually what I would say deploying it at scale and actually capturing the value that they're seeing. And the potential, 15-20% of the EBITDA of the company, if you do this, is probably the average that people are shooting for. But because there's so many other issues that still are not resolved. There's regulation issues, there's risk issues, there's meaningful investment, there's very practical, talent, there's energy, there's chip availability. But all of that is just consistent with this really big, high potential technology wave, and any good company has to be able to evaluate the potential impact of any of these waves. Just like if you watched, I don't know what comparable waves will be that we've all lived through. If you're a company that still is based on fixed telephony, not mobile, you're probably dead. We haven't finished the conversion of companies' ERP systems from on-prem to the cloud yet. That's still going on. This is at least that magnitude, and it's potentially still early. And where it'll be 2, 3, 4 years from now. I do have abiding faith that technology has always been a tool that shortens either speed to insight or speed to results. And you can think about, that's a little bit what we do as consultants. We help you shorten speed to insight, and we help you get the results faster. Now, what happens when you create more time, you usually been able to deploy that extra time into productive use. And at least that's my hope, that we'll continue to do that, and that we will continue to need, Homo sapiens MBA consultants, at least for whatever planning horizon we want.
Good. I will restrain myself from talking about AI and open it up to our audience. So do we have any questions? Yeah, one over there. Do we have running mics? Yeah, okay.
Hey, thank you for your time, Manny. Really appreciate it. So I've noticed you are one of a very small group of either East or Southeast Asian CEOs in the Fortune 500, and there's been quite a bit of research of how this group of people is very underrepresented in corporate leadership, specifically in the United States. I know a lot of it has to do with collectivism that is very prevalent in Asian countries versus individualism in more of like the Western cultures. I'm curious how you personally have navigated like your personal transition, especially having grown up in the Philippines in the earlier part of your life, and how maybe that has helped, or maybe that has maybe potentially even hurt you as you've moved up the ranks at Bain.
Yes, well, thank you. Thank you for the question. You know, it's, I've sort of tried to frame it now that we are all, you know, we're all multifaceted individuals. And depending on what particular facet of yourself, you could say yes. You know, so you said, okay, I'm a Southeast Asian. So therefore, by definition, in corporate America, at the CEO level, yes, I'm a minority. You know, I can go to the U.S. Business Roundtable, 200 largest American CEOs, and I can see it. I can count. I can also see how few women there are. I can also see how few black faces there are. You know, so, but you could also say as a multifaceted, multicultural, you know, I grew up as a native English speaker. I'm a straight male. There's so many parts. In San Francisco, where I'm from, and the company I work for, actually, Asians are, in many cases, the majority. You know, if you went to Stanford, if I actually went to Cal, 40% of the population. If you go to Bain San Francisco. So it's one of those things that, you know, and I'm an immigrant, kind of. I was actually, by the way, I was born in Boston, but I went back to Manila when I was 5 months old, and I didn't come back till I was 18. So, you know, the specific question, I've sort of always looked at what I bring from a perspective of positivity, as opposed to, you know, defensiveness. And by the way, I spend a lot of time on Asian American causes. I helped the Asian American Foundation, you know. But I try to say, what can I do? What can I leverage? And turns out, you know, you said I'm Filipino. So yes, I'm Southeast Asian. I'm also Spanish heritage as a nation. It's easier for me. The Philippines was an American colony. I feel like I have an easier time. I can do business in South America. I can come to this country as an immigrant and integrate relatively fast. All of us are elite here, right? You're going to Columbia Business School. I went to MIT. So part of it is I always wanted to define everything around on the positive. It's not what I don't have, but what disadvantages. You know, what can this help me do in my sense? And at least that's worked for me. And then also as a leader and as a role model, you do your best to help everybody, but you don't spend all your time just helping, you know, other Filipinos. You try to build a more diverse and inclusive society by helping all, you know, all flavors. And that's worked for me. And I've been fortunate, by the way, to work for a firm that I can tell you I have not encountered, you know, overt discrimination or racism too often. And I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
Take one more question. Okay.
Hi, I'm Camille. I'm also from the Philippines. Thank you so much for being
Kumusta
here.
ka?
Yeah, kumusta? I have a couple of questions. So first is, a lot of people here are from consulting or going to consulting. I wonder what you think are the key shifts that need to happen in consulting space as we go in this like AI transformation. As second, or like as the world is going through the whole AI transformation. And second thing is just like, what keeps you up at night? Like, what are your key priorities right now? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. By the way, I'm happy to go longer if you have time. I know we're probably, you know, the way the evolution of consulting, just like a lot of industries, it starts with always what are the needs of your clients. You know, so from my vantage point, the way we've evolved. If I look at Bain 6 years ago, you know. We were a lot less deep in technology. Everything we did was organic. But why did we do what we did? You know, why did we broaden everything that Bain is doing, doubling in size? it was all to serve the needs of our clients better. And so there's not a big gap between the answer to your question and the dean's question earlier. Our clients today, to have a company achieve its full potential, you need to enable your strategy with technology. You need to have your strategy be more resilient in this world that's much more unpredictable. You need to be able to adapt where you sell, where you build in the complicated global world. You have to be able to fund it, where capital will actually cost. All of those, you can say, what does it mean for you? You need a better appreciation of capital markets. You need a better appreciation of global forces. You need a better appreciation of technology. And you have to do it all in a much more sustainable way, because this world ain't going to exist if we keep going down the path they're in. And so those outside forces actually shape the nature of what organizations like mine evolve to. Candidly, it probably shapes the nature of what good business schools also do, and to give you all the skills you need. And then what keeps me awake at night, I'm probably not as much of a worrier as that. I try to sleep reasonably well, but I am concerned, about the state of our world. And we've had the better part of 80 years since the last global war. We have several wars going on around the system, and as the world gets more and more polarized, both across countries and even within countries, it's just a harder and harder time. And, sure you think about this for your daughter. I have 4 kids. I hope to have grandkids within the next, I won't pressure my kids, but sooner rather than later. It's a complicated world, and it becomes even more important for people like us, organizations like us, right? Look at this. Look at this room. This is a global population of people who can try to make a difference, all from different countries, races, genders. And for the world to succeed and survive and thrive, the role that places like Colombia, hopefully Bain, plays as often the glue that keeps us together. That's very important. So hopefully whatever all of you do, and you're going to do great things, the starting point is we have to be good citizens of planet Earth.
We'll take one more last question, given that, Manny, you gave us...
Yes, please. I thought this was still 7, but...
Hello, Manny. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Jem. Actually, I'm a Bain Istanbul consultant, and I'm going to go back to Bain. My question is more about AI's impact and productivity gain enabled by its impact to how we compose teams at Bain. I was wondering whether there's going to be a fundamental change to how teams are composed at Bain, how we should think about M+4 structures or the leader team structure.
Okay, so thank you for the question. Glad you're going back to this. I'll reframe it a little bit so it's not so inside Bain baseball, and hopefully it's relevant to everybody. Because I do think, the construct, it's also related to the other question. There was a time that to be a good business consultant, you could be what we would call a generalist. And that's arguably, even though as an engineer, that's who I was, that's how I grew up. You learn about all the different parts of the business. You learn all the different aspects of a company at business school. Even though when I did, you have to write an integrative thesis and put it all together. And I happened to write mine on General Electric, of all companies, and it's not a company that's not around in its same form. So today, the construct of a team of people that can actually make a difference in a company, whether you hire it from outside as a consulting firm or whether you form a team inside a company, many of you will not work for consultants, but you will likely work in teams. Some of you might be iconoclast individuals. You'll likely work in teams. And the essence of the question, to have a multifaceted team now to solve any business problem, will require some people in the team to have some deep expertise in technology in some way. That's just what I think the operating reality of the world is. And sometimes that team of people will not all be from your company. Because this is another sidebar. Often when we're doing some of this work now, we have to do it with other organizations. Some of them we bought. They're part of our umbrella. Some of them we partner with. But often to actually get to what I mentioned earlier, not just speed to insight, but speed to results, to actually get results and change in the company, for most business problems, ultimately, your company's technology will have to adjust. And so that just is, that comes with the territory. It doesn't mean you give up all the other integrative generalist thinking, because they are complicated organizations. But that's been a meaningful change that our organization's gone through. Most companies have gone through a version of that.
And we're trying to implement it here at school.
Yeah.
For all of our students. Manny, thank you so much. And thank you all for coming. And thank you for leading a wonderful organization.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your attention.